inside me, my spirit is weeping.
Okay, Gary Laux now joins us on the Bob Tuscon Show. This is the first time we're airing this information, and I'll let you be the judge as to whether or not you find it relevant and important. Now, 50 years later, just about 50 years later of, the largest event in the country's history, short of 9/11, of course, now, but this was an event that everyone will remember. It lives on still to this day, and there's still quite a bit of questions that the general public have, and they should have these questions. Okay, this was a coup in my eyes. This was a changing of the guards that needs to be exposed and needs to be, gotten to the bottom of. And without further ado, I'm going to bring Gary Laux on. Gary, you were the neighbor of Sam Kenney. Tell me about what you learned from him, and who was Sam A. Kenney?
Well, Sam was a real good friend, and of course he was my neighbor. He lived about 25 feet from me, and we hung around a lot. You know, we became good friends through the years, and I was his neighbor for 7 years, and then I moved up the road basically about a half a mile, but we maintained our relationship. But one evening back in '86, I stopped in to see Sam. It was kind of late at night, maybe 8:30, and he made us a drink. He said, "Sit down, let's have a visit." So he started talking about his life in general, and starting high school and taking it right up to when he left the Secret Service. And he started getting in detail about his days at the agency, and he said he definitely saw and heard the shot from the grassy knoll. He said, "I heard that, and I saw some smoke." I said, well, that's interesting because, you've never talked about that to me before. He said, well, I did. And then he talked further on about a conspiracy. He says it's impossible to take out a president, a leader of a country like ours, without some kind of a conspiracy. He said, one man can't do this. And so he was just, those 2 points just confirmed, some news that was out at the time, some of the sayings and the stats and the investigations. This could have happened, it may have happened this way, but when he said it, it had a lot more meaning. He was there, he was in the car behind the presidential limo, he had full field of vision. But then he told me something that it kind of is going to close the case on a 50-year-old mystery where the bullet CE-399 came from, and how it got there. That's the bullet was found on the stretcher at Parkland Memorial Hospital, and Sam had found this while cleaning up the car and going through the presidential car, and he just picked it up and laid it on that stretcher. And I said, "Wow!" I said, everybody's wondered where that come from. He says, "I did it." I said, all right. And,
is that the magic bullet?
I don't know if it could be really classified as the magic bullet, because I think that was the shot that went through President Kennedy, unfortunately, and then through John Connally, and supposed to came out pristine. So I guess it is the magic bullet. But he found it, and he just laid it on the stretcher, and that was it. Never said a word. And so until he told me, I don't believe he ever told anyone else. I don't believe he did, but if he did, I've never heard it in print or in any news reports or anything. So I said, well, that's cool. And then we got all done, he says, you can tell this stuff. And I said, okay, I'll tell it. If you want it out there, I'll tell it. He says, but I think you better wait until I die. I said, okay. I said, I hope it isn't any time soon. And of course, he's been gone a while now. So, but I thought the 50th anniversary was a good time to tell this because he wanted it told. I'm not looking for fame or fortune. I'm just the messenger here.
Right.
And I think he wanted to clear up the mystery of how that CE-399 got there. And he just didn't want to tell anybody else but me, so I said to him, I'll take care of business when the day comes. So the day's today, I guess.
Today is the day, and I'm glad you came out with this. Noted JFK researcher, none other than Dr. James Fetzer is with us as well. Jim, what are the implications of his story here?
Well, I think it's a very nice clarification of two rather striking points. One is the origin of the magic bullet. Most of us had assumed that this bullet had been placed on a stretcher probably by Jack Ruby, and that Sam Kenny did it is very interesting. Jack was hit by a shallow shot in the back, 5.5 inches below the collar to the right of the spinal column. It only went in about as far as the second knuckle on your little finger. It had been fired from the top of the county records building by a Dallas deputy sheriff by the name of Harry Weatherford, using a larger caliber weapon to implant a Mannlicher Carcano bullet in JFK using a plastic collar known as a sabot, S-A-B-O-T. And it's very plausible that that bullet remained in the limousine, worked its way out when they were just, moving Jack around to get his body out of the limo after he slumped over to the side. I mean, I think that Sam Kenny's story makes great sense in that he at Parkland, that he'd put it on a stretcher. And also, I have long used a photograph from the pictures of the pain by Richard Trask that shows a Secret Service agent with a bucket of water and a sponge washing blood and brains out of the back seat of the limo. And it was such an obvious case of destruction of evidence. And what we learn now is that the person doing that was Sam Kenny.
Gary, tell me about that for a moment.
Go ahead.
I want to ask Gary about this because this is fascinating. Was Sam conscious of the fact that he was essentially cleaning up a crime scene?
I can't, really say what he was thinking, but what he told me was basically he didn't want the American people to have to see that. He wanted to get the car cleaned up, and he didn't want the president to be remembered like that. And he just thought he was doing something for his president, not even considering a crime scene. I'm sure that day it was such a surprise and shock. I don't even think he even thought about it. But he was loyal to the president, and that's the way he took care of business. He was covering his back, and taking care of business, and that's just the way it was. He never said anything to me about, dang, I shouldn't have done that. I screwed up a crime scene, Never mentioned it. He just said he wanted to get that car cleaned up and all that, the body mass out of it. And that was it. He didn't really go into great detail about it. As far as cleaning the car, he got the cars ready, put the top on them, and got them back to the airport, and got them loaded aboard the 130 and back to Edwards Air Force Base.
Gary, our listeners are very skeptical of all information, as they should be, and they think with a critical mind using critical thinking. Of course, Dr. Jim Fetzer is a logician. The question comes up in our chat room at bobtuscan.com as to what is the proof of this story. Do you have any, signed papers from Sam, or is this all based on what he told you verbally?
I never thought about ever having him sign any type of a document, nor did he ever mention it. I'm sure had it ever came to my mind, and I asked he would have. But it's just his words to me, and
okay.
Wanted him out there. I'm kind of secondhand info, but I have no desire for fame or fortune.
No problem. Gary, stay with us. Whistleblower on the John F. Kennedy assassination, talking about Sam Kenny, Secret Service agent, as well as Dr. Jim Fetzer and Dr. Kevin Barrett.
Corporate media dominates the American opinion. Finding independent voices that counter this avalanche is becoming increasingly.
Names can be added, those of hundreds and thousands of others who stood in the way of the new order. Right now isn't what we're building for.
It's the Bob Tuscon Show. Welcome back. We're going to go right back into this. We have David with us, who was Sam Kinney's neighbor and longtime friend. And, I was thinking, David, part of your credibility exists with your background, your personal background. You're a Marine, from what I understand, and you've never been one to necessarily believe in conspiracies, but this really touched you, and this personal information that you received from Sam was important to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I was quite amazed that he trusted me with that information. You would thought you would think that he would have given that to, his Secret Service friends, which he may have, But no, he entrusted this information with me, and he wanted it put forth. And I guess I was the guy he picked, and I'm doing it now. So hopefully it's well received. It doesn't, it's people who knew Sam. He was quite a straight shooter, very loyal, great American. People who know me know I wouldn't do something stupid like this if it wasn't true. But I wished I'd have gotten it on paper, but I didn't, and so it's my words. It's coming from me. I wish Sam was here to tell you himself, but he didn't do it all those years, so I guess he was never going to tell anybody. He never was one to give news conferences or give the press. He did do a couple, 2-3 things with another individual, a couple to 3 interviews, and he did do a thing, I think it was NBC back in 92 or 3, but they only put about 2 minutes of it on TV, a 3-hour shoot, and I was amazed that he did that. I was really surprised that he did do that, because he was pretty private, when it came to that, and he picked who he would talk about it to. He just didn't talk about it to everybody.
What did he do after the Kennedy assassination? Did he remain in the Secret Service, and if so, in what capacity?
I think he remained in the same capacity that he was. He was the backup driver. He maintained the vehicles, kept security on them. He even went to the Ford plant when they were being built. He would be there with the cars, and he stayed on as an agent until President Johnson came in, and he retired when President Johnson was in office, and he returned back to Palm Springs, Florida, and settled in, and he enjoyed retirement. He had a 5th-wheeler, and he used to take off every year, him and his wife. And, he enjoyed the good life.
Exactly, just the regular American.
Stay out of the picture, stay out of the news, and retire and put it all behind him. And he often would have a lot of his Secret Service friends would stop by, and they would get together on occasion. And but he was when he retired from there, he was retired, and he did do a little work for the local police department there for a little while, but that's about all he did. He just retired and enjoyed traveling.
Right. Gary, let me ask you this. A lot of people are concerned about LBJ's role in this. Did he speak of LBJ as a suspicious party?
Well, one time we were visiting, and he said something to the effect of, when something like this happens, you have to look to see who would benefit the most. And he said all the fingers were pointing at LBJ. And he did say that. And he said, but, it was talked about, it was discussed, I'm sure it was investigated, but nothing ever become of it. But he did say that, yeah.
Interesting. Dr. Fetzer, does that make sense to you, Jim?
Oh, yeah. Everything that he has reported fits together very well. In fact, he told me before how LBJ was very arrogant and authoritarian and directive toward the Secret Service, whereas Jack was completely compliant and supportive, and even mentioned that sometimes JFK would go out and have beer with these guys. That's really fascinating.
Wow. Gary, I'm going to let you go, but I want you to reiterate, just so it's out in the open one last time, all of the information. I'm just going to give you a few moments here to tell us once again, even if you have to repeat some of what we mentioned in the last segment, what exactly Secret Service agent Sam Kinney told you and how you feel this is so important.
The basic three topics that I wanted to get out there was that he did feel and that a shot came from the grassy knoll. He said he saw smoke, heard the shot. So that confirms that. He also thought that there was a conspiracy to shoot his president because one man couldn't do it. And he's probably right on the money. One man couldn't do it. And 3, CE 399, the bullet that was found on the stretcher there was in the Parkland Memorial, was in fact placed on that stretcher by him. He found that bullet in a presidential limo, picked it up, and I believe he also said he had a piece of the president's skull, a small piece, and he laid them both on the stretcher. And that was it, and he just never, just like walked away and never said a word to anybody. And then, of course, later on they found it in the hospital, but he definitely wanted it out there. He asked me to take care of business after his death, and he was my friend, and I'm doing that today.
He asked you not to release this until he was dead, and his wife was dead as well, correct?
No, I told him I would also wait until Hazel was here, and he says, that's a good decision. He says, that's a good idea. I said, well, I don't want people bothering her, and so she was a sweet lady. She passed away in December of 2002, and so I'm about 11 years later getting it out, but it's a good time to get it out on the 50th, so it may have some impact. I hope it answers a question, confirms a couple.
Well, Gary, there are several conferences going on. Jim will tell us about one he'll be at in Santa Barbara. I know Dr. Kevin Barrett, who's also with us, is coming together with a great article on the JFK assassination coming up for the 50th anniversary. And this information will be another much-needed piece of this puzzle that we're still putting together all these years later. Gary, thank you very much for releasing this information now and having the wherewithal to do so, because it is important, and somebody like yourself deserves a lot of respect for coming out with this information, even considering the possible, blowback, for lack of a better term, that you might get from this. So I appreciate that, Gary.
No problem. Glad to do it.
All right, thank you so much. And be sure to tune into Jim's show, Dr. Fetzer's show, tomorrow, where Gary will also be talking with him about this information. So that'll be at, where's your show at these days, Jim?
At RevereRadio.net, Bob.
Okay, great. All right, well, there you go, folks. That was Gary Laux. He was the Secret Service agent Sam Kinney's neighbor, and he's sharing with us some information that needed to be told and added to, this piece of the puzzle, this puzzle that we're still working on here all these years later. Let's see here. We have only a couple minutes before the break, but I want to bring Dr. Barrett on for a moment and get his take on this. Kevin, what do you make of what we just heard?
Well, it's very interesting, and I didn't hear anything that would make me really doubt what Gary was saying. It's very interesting, this story of picking up the magic bullet, putting it on a stretcher, and cleaning out the limousine. I wonder whether he might be more, or rather, whether the agent was more complicit than he would have let on. You sort of always wonder when you get these kinds of quasi confessions or blurt outs, like whether the guys are blurting it all out or whether they're only blurting half of it out. But right. Jim, who's more of an authority on this case than I am, seems to find that it all seems to fit pretty well together.
Is that the case, Jim?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Kevin's got it right. Yeah, what he's saying is very interesting on a couple of very significant details because, my presentation, my lectures on JFK forever have included both the magic bullet and that it was ostensibly found on a stretcher, probably dropped or left by Jack Ruby.
Awesome.
And
well, we'll get into Jack Rubenstein in just a moment.
And I use this.
Tuscan Show.
There are many water filters to choose from, but there is